going here. My name is Roy Butler. I'm the Tech Support Manager for Midnite Solar. Lurking in the background here, and equally as important, is Ryan Stankovitz, who was the sole tech support guy for many years. So he'll be here to pop in and give us a little bit of background information on certain aspects of the controllers. And so let's get moving along. We're going to start with the Classic. And our main product line here, the 150, the 200, and the 250. Very powerful controllers, a lot of flexibility, a lot of features. Definitely our engineers like to pack a lot of features into a very small case, and they're very good at it. So these come in 3 operating voltages, 150, 200, and 250. That's the input voltage, your PV input voltage. We can charge a 12 through 72 volt nominal battery bank, and you can pick any voltage in between. You're not stuck to 12, 24, 48, 72, but you can go up to 72. It's about a 100 volt limit, so 72 is nominal. You can go up to about 100 on the battery output side, and that's about it. The standard Classics have ground fault protection and arc fault built in. You can do solar, wind, and hydro on the standard models. And Hyper-VOC, we'll talk about that a little bit more later on, but I have a couple of cautionary statements for you on the Hyper-VOC end of things. We're finding people routinely design their systems into the Hyper-VOC range, and that's not such a good idea. Like I said, we'll cover that a little bit later on. Manual and auto equalization capabilities, and it's fully internet capable. And we've got some nice monitoring software to show you here in just a bit. You can have remote and local displays. It does data logging. You've got 380 days of history, 24 hours of data at 5-minute intervals. And the communications, Ethernet, Modbus, and RS-232. So I think most of the people use the Ethernet, but a lot of the hobbyists out there are beginning to use the Modbus. A lot of third-party applications out there for that. You can put parallel operation. There's parallel operation available for multiple Classic systems and FollowMe, and they are ETL listed for USA and Canada, and as always, made in America, made in Washington State. So, nice line of USA-made controllers here. Then we have our Classic Lite, somewhat less expensive. The main issue here, not issue, but the main difference here is the fact that it has no display. It has dip switch settings. That's how you program it. And it does not have arc fault. That's the biggest thing. No arc fault, no display. It does have ground fault. Still charge up to a 72 volt nominal battery, and all other features are intact within this Classic Lite. The other thing you can do is you can monitor this with the local app software. That works very well. You can then have you set it to custom in the dip switch section, and you can then program it via the local app and monitor it via the local app. You can also use a remote MNGP display on it as well if you care to do that. So you're not losing very much in the way of functionality here, but you are saving somewhat on cost. And then we have the SL. This was a recent addition. This is a solar-only, simplified version of the standard Classic. It has ground fault, but no Ethernet and no arc fault. Definitely, there's a streamlined menu. We've gotten rid of some of the more confusing things in it. So if you're concerned about that brother-in-law effect, hey, what does this button do? What does this feature do? This is probably the Classic for you. And if you don't want to answer those dealers out there, you don't want to answer a lot of IT questions as the customer tries to connect it to the internet, well, this is probably the one for you because no Ethernet. So, but still, you have all the other features common in the standard Classic, 12 through 72 volt battery charging and ground fault, the data logging, etc. They'll do solar, wind, and hydro. We have a lot of customers out there that are using them for the wind and the hydro, and working quite well. A lot of adjustments that you have, a lot of different settings that you have to fine-tune the Classic to your particular application, to your input source. We Recommend in many cases the Midnite Clipper to be used for hydro and wind, and at least in as many applications we would require it. If there's a chance that the hydro or wind generator can over voltage the classic, then the Midnite Clipper would be required for precision voltage and generator RPM control. You don't want your generator freewheeling, and we don't want the classic blowing up. That ruins everybody's day. For the wind application, you need a 16-step wind curve. There are many already programmed into the classic for some of the more standard wind turbines. For the wind turbines that are not in there, and there are many, including a lot of home-built turbines, a custom curve will have to be generated. There's a lot of good documentation on our website, as well as some really good videos that Ryan has done that show you how to make that wind curve. I'm also one of the wind guys, so I'm available by phone here or by email, and my contact information along with other tech support people here are all available on the website, so you can give us a call, but Ryan and I are usually the ones that are doing the wind curve, so get a hold of us if you have a wind turbine application. Communication. This is the Mahmud Bus protocol that we use, and it's published. You can download it. A lot of hobbyists are using it. A lot of third-party software available for it. Some of it is available on our website, links to it on our website, and a lot more available on the forum. Forum is a really good place to get some information. We have some incredibly amazing people on that forum that are doing some pretty cool things with our equipment. We also offer this communication adapter for use with the SMA Sunny Island. This basically allows the SMA to control the battery charging of the classic. So you would still set the charging set points in the classic like you normally would, but then once this adapter is in place and you choose SMA mode in the classic and everything is connected to the Sunny Island, the Sunny Island assumes control over the classic, and it all works seamlessly as a complete system. So ground fault and arc fault. These are built into the classic. The ground fault's built into the classic Light and classic SL, and as I said previously, no arc fault in the classic Light or classic SL. You can also use the ground fault protection breaker assembly that we have with the remote trip for more flexible GFP functionality. You can actually program one of the aux relays to trip that ground fault breaker if needed. There's a lot of settings in there for arc fault. If any of you have worked with arc fault in other capacities, especially those who are electricians who were in that nice arc fault debacle when the standard AC breakers first came out in the residential market, you know that you can have false trips. There are a lot of settings that we have to customize the arc fault detection system, not defeat it necessarily, but to desensitize it if you're having false trips, and that's been proven very helpful around. You can actually get false trips on the DC and the AC side. It can actually come through the inverter from the AC side. It's very sensitive, and you can have different appliances in the home, vacuum cleaners, tabletop appliances, etc. We see power tools doing it, circular saws, etc. So it's nice to have those features in there where you can actually dial it back a bit and maybe eliminate that false tripping.
Hey, Roy.
Yes.
I've got a question. I'll just read the question and I'll answer it for you. When will we see the COM adapter be able to see and control a classic through the Mate 3? My answer for that would probably be not likely to happen, considering that we're as close as we are on having a competitive inverter to compete with the Radiant. So I would say that at the moment we're focusing all our resources on getting that inverter done.
Yeah, good answer on that one. You can monitor the Outback with some third-party software that we'll cover here in just a little bit, but as far as for programming, nothing on the table for that. We have auto or manual equalization modes. The Classic has two modes that you can use to equalize the battery. like I said, auto or manual, but it has a user adjustable interval for the auto EQ, and you can also program in retry if the EQ didn't complete on the first day, because of course, you know, you can schedule it, but unfortunately you can't schedule the sun. I wish we could. I've been trying for 20 years off-grid. Hasn't worked for me. Good luck if it works for you. Let me know if it works for you. I want to talk to you about that. This is probably one we get a lot of calls, one of the ones that we get a lot of calls on here, probably one of the largest volume of calls. What's this light mean? So there are several LED indicators here, and you can actually control the mode to a certain extent. Off is, well, no LED activity whatsoever. There was a guy named Rick that complained about all the LEDs, and so now we have Rick mode, and that only displays the errors. LED mode 1 allows the Aux1 and Aux2 indicators to show and displays errors and warnings, as well as the green float light on the front panel. In blinking mode, my favorite, the LEDs cycle around in a loop, and it is pretty impressive. I've turned that on for various customers, and they come in two camps. Either, hey, leave that on, I really like it, or get rid of that thing, that's annoying. But anyway, it is fun. So for those of you who may not know, we have, there's a couple of sets of LEDs. You see the one flashing here on the animation on my screen on the left-hand side. That's on the main display, what we call the MNGP. There are also some inside the little vent that you see up toward the top, that nice Art Deco vent on the circuit board inside, and you will see auxiliary 1 and auxiliary 2 relay lights in there. Aux2 is a yellow light, and Aux1 is a red light. You also have a little blue light in there too, and that's when the classics are communicating with other classics in FollowMe mode. We'll cover that here in just a little bit. Firmware updates, and we've had several. You can update the classic, keep it current, add features, take care of bugs, and there's a USB port inside the classic that allows you to connect this to a PC, and no Mac right now. Mac is different, but Ryan, are we able to do Linux? I wasn't sure where we stand on the Linux end of things. And when Ryan rejoins us here, maybe he can answer that question. But definitely on a PC, and we support various Windows operating systems. Make sure if you download the firmware update off of our website under software, the software tab, make sure that you get the instructions specific for your Windows operating system. Very important. There are differences, you know, from XP on up through 7, and Vista, and all the way up through 8.1, 10. There's even actually a very special updater for Windows 10. We had some issues with that. They changed something at Microsoft, and we had to adapt to that. So, and how to monitor your classics. The local app is very popular. I use this at home. My system is probably 200 feet away from my office, and I can sit and monitor my system, program my system. Very helpful. I have a wind turbine on one of my classics, and it was very, very handy for me to be able to customize my wind curve for that in real time. I could pick a windy day, and I could try something a little bit different on the curve to try to squeeze a little bit more power out of my turbine, and hit submit and watch the differences in the gauges. It's very popular with our customers, and I think it's a pretty neat little program. So the graphs can be displayed by line, bar, round, or sketch, but the main dashboard is what you see behind that little graph bar there, and it looks like a nice, cool retro dashboard. So Ryan has a 5-part local app video series now that he recently finished, and it goes through the local app in very fine detail, step by step, and I find that very, very valuable for our customers and for myself. Yeah, so check that out. It's under our documents section and under videos. So you can chart battery voltage, kilowatt hours, total kilowatt hours. You can actually look at FET temperature and battery temperature. You've got the wattage and amp hours, everything. You know, you can see that that text as well as I can. I can't stand reading directly off of a PowerPoint. The probably any piece of information you could possibly need is available through the local app. And that's why this works so well with the Classic Lite. If you don't have a display on the Classic, then this is ideal. You can monitor this via your PC at home. If you're good at port forwarding, then you could access this from the road as well. But most customers seem to prefer to just do it within their home. I'm one of those. I am not a port forwarding expert, so it stays within my house here in the wireless system.
Hey, Roy.
Yes.
Just to add to that, we're going to be doing a webinar series, some training directly on that, on just communicating with the Classic and how to get through some common routers and some stuff like that. So I'll look for that.
Can I attend that one too?
Yes, you will be in there. Yep.
Yep. Good deal. Yeah, I need some of that. So the yeah, works on PCs and works on Mac. And I had asked you a question earlier, and I think you'd stepped away. What's the latest? Are we still not able to do our firmware updates with the Mac, correct?
Yes, at this time that is correct. Firmware updates on the Classic are Windows only at the moment. We have a Mac updater. We just need to get an engineer to bring it back out of the mothballs and support it. The problem was really tech support. None of us in tech support have Macs, and we weren't really sure how to walk a customer through it. So now that we have Matt on board doing this stuff for us, I think we can bring that back.
And where do we stand on Linux?
Well, that same one does Linux. The Linux and Mac kind of run in the same, I don't know how you want to say it, but they run the same stuff in the background, so that same one works on both.
Okay, good deal. And we have my Midnite. Now we've recently gone to a different server, my Midnite 2. To the best of my knowledge, our original one, my Midnite, is still up and running, at least for a while. We've got some folks at remote sites that cannot access their site until April, May, maybe even June, snowed in, mountaintop, etc. And you have to do a firmware update. You have to have firmware 2079 or newer, and in order for it to access my Midnite 2. So we're running these in parallel for the time being, but just be aware that we are phasing out the regular My Midnite, and you'll need to go to mymidnite2.com and make sure that you've done the firmware update, and you should be able to establish communication there.
Quick note on that. 2079 actually has a bug in it, so I would suggest that anybody that hasn't updated yet and is watching this and wants to get on the new My Midnite, reach out to us for the beta software. There was a day counter in 2079 that expired at 9.9 days, and the Ethernet would lock up. So we do know that, and we have fixed that. So if you're getting ready to update today after this webinar, give us a shout and we'll get you the new firmware.
Yeah, and Ryan, just for everyone's edification here, what is the firmware version of that going to be, the beta?
Good question. I'd have to look it up. I don't remember the number off the top of my head. I can look it up for you, but I just don't remember it off the top of my head.
Not a problem. Okay, so get a hold of us. We can get you that that beta firmware. And by the way, just so everyone knows, we get a lot of calls on this. This is for monitoring only. You cannot program the Classic at all with my Midnite 2. This is strictly data acquisition, strictly monitoring. So you've got 380 days of data in the daily logs. It's not as refined as the recent history, the last 24 hours. It just has the some basic information in there, but it does have 380 days. Very, very handy to go back through and spot trends. If you think you've got an issue with your array and you're slowly losing production, you can actually go back through and try to track that. The Classic logs data points every 5 minutes. In the recent logs, much more granular, much more refined data, and you can see this on the display on the Classic or on some of it back. And how far back does it go in the My Midnite? There is a time limit on that for going back for historical data. Ryan, how far back does that go? And we've lost Ryan again. That guy multitasks more than any 3 people I know. So even though it's viewable on the display on the Classic, I find the best way to monitor it is via the local app. It has graphing capabilities as well on the display, but again, it's a very small display. Again, I'll push it toward the local app. It's a really great program. Aux1 and Aux2, something else we get a lot of calls in here. These are your auxiliary relays that you can program to do all kinds of interesting things. One of the main things these are used for are for running diversion loads, starting battery box vent fans, and so forth. So auxiliary 1 can be configured a couple of different ways. In one way, it's a 12-volt signal. It provides 12 volts up to 200 milliamps. That's very, very handy for running a relay, solid-state relay or a mechanical relay, so that you can then use a larger load on the other side, because, of course, you can't run anything very large through these small contacts, but a relay can handle a much higher current. Or it can be a dry contact, which just completes a circuit. And that's good for well, some people are using these as a generator start. It will work as a generator start, but it's a dumb generator start. It does not receive feedback from the generator. It does not know it has accomplished the task. So it is a workaround to start a generator, but it's really not one I would recommend. Like I said, it just does not verify that that anything has started up. Aux2 can be used as an output as well. It's PWM, so pulse width modulated. So that is very good for running a solid-state relay and to use it for diversion control, and gives you very, very fine control over that diversion load. I mean, certainly the load would have to be able to accept the PWM signal, such as a resistive load. You certainly wouldn't want to run, you know, a fan or anything like that on PWM, but definitely on a resistive load works very good. Can also be used as an input, and what we mean by that is if you apply a signal, a 12-volt signal from the outside, such as from a battery management system on a lithium battery bank, you can actually cause the controller to go into resting. So in other words, if the battery management system says, hey, I've had enough, I don't want any more input from you, it can turn the Classic off. So the Whiz-Bang Junior can also go onto the Aux2, and we'll talk a little bit more about the Whiz-Bang Junior here in just a bit, but that's our fairly new current sense module that gives you some really advanced DC battery data and turns the Classic into a pretty good battery monitor. So you can see down below all the functions that are available. We have many, many modes available for Aux1 and Aux2. Your vent fans, you know, triggering diversion loads for float low and float high, clipper control when you're using it for hydro or wind, and we have daylights, night lights, and waste not high is a really good one. It allows 3-stage battery charging. Others do too, but waste not high seems to be the most popular one for when your batteries are full and it's gone to float. It'll turn on a diversion load while still maintaining float voltage in the battery bank, so you're not wasting anything. And you have low battery disconnect and so forth. So very, very sophisticated programming in Aux1 and Aux2. And the Whiz-Bang Junior I promised to talk about here. So this attaches to a standard 50 millivolt 500 amp shunt, such as the Deltec. And this would wire directly to the side of that, and the little purple wire goes up into the Aux2 positive, and it pulses information back and forth along the little purple wire there, and it gives you the state of charge percentage. You can actually, excuse me, you can actually enable end amps for going into float, and some other little nice little features in there. Now, if you already have a DC monitoring system on there, like a trimetric or something along those lines, you can still piggyback this alongside the shunt, and it will work with another monitoring system there. So that's a nice feature. When you enable the Whiz-Bang Junior, you'll notice that another screen comes up on the in the local app, and you'll look in the upper right-hand quadrant there, and you'll see where you've got Whiz-Bang Junior information. So it actually shows you what's going in and out of the battery bank at any given moment. In this particular instance, it's a -3 amps, so the loads are consuming more than what's coming in from the array or whatever the charging source is. And it also shows you the net amp hours and remaining amp hours. So state of charge 74%. So it's pretty handy. You do need to calibrate this. There are settings in there for battery efficiency. A lot of people don't seem to understand very much about battery efficiency. So, you know, if this thing is incredibly optimistic and it's lying to you, we find that people are setting their batteries at 98% efficient or something like that. I don't think I've ever seen a battery bank at 98% efficiency. So, you know, maybe upper 80s for a flooded lead acid, low 90s for some others. But it is adjustable, and it'll take a little while to calibrate it, but eventually you'll get it calibrated nicely, and it gives you a nice accurate view of what's going on in the battery bank. So power graphs, these are pretty handy. There is a definite relationship between the input voltage and the battery voltage. The bigger the spread between the two, the less efficient the controller is. The circuitry, the FETs, etc., have to work much harder in order to make that conversion and bucket down to the battery voltage, and so you lose some in the heat. And this chart illustrates that. So you can see from a system design point of view that you want to come in at a high enough voltage so that you can minimize your wire size for your wire run, but at the same time not so high that you lose efficiency. There is a balance point there, a sweet spot, so to speak. So we have these power graphs for the 150, the 200, and the 250. We'll run through them fairly quickly here, but they are on our website. They're also in the manual for the various controllers. Excuse me. So you can see here, if you look at the little green line, 120 volts coming in, you can see that's on the low end of the scale. So if we look at the 12-volt system on the left, you can only process 1325 watts and 92 amps. But if you come in at the lower voltage at 70 volts, you can see you can produce a little bit more. And it becomes more dramatic at the for the higher voltage battery banks. So if you look all the way to the right, you can see there's a spread between 4438 and 5022. So on a 48 volt system and coming in at around 70, 75 volts, you can see that you can process a little over 5 kilowatts on a classic 150. So it's a pretty powerful charge controller, but you know, you have to realize some of the limitations here, and again, that relationship between input voltage and battery voltage. Same thing on the 200, and one thing that you, as good American consumers, we always think the bigger the number, the more powerful the controller. You know, I don't want a 150, I want a 250, and that's not the case. In this case here, again, the higher the input voltage versus the battery voltage, the less efficient it is. So you'll begin to notice now that the classics, as we go up in power, generally don't produce quite as much power out the other end. You will lose efficiency. And I think the biggest example of that here is you look at the 250 power graph, and now you're down to, you know, 3,700 watts or so, as opposed to 5,000 or 5,400. So that's a good way to illustrate that relationship. Midnite Clipper. So this would be required for, I would say, most turbines, not all, but most, when used with the Classic, and hydro as well. What this does is it actually will load the turbine before it even passes through the, in the case of a three-phase wild AC unit, it actually will control the turbine on the three-phase wild AC input side. By itself, it's a it can be a fail-safe diversion control. So you set a fail-safe voltage in there. If you've got a Classic 150, you'd set it maybe around 140. And if anything ever happened to the Classic, this would grab a hold of that input and just throw it all into the resistor bank, and you would not have an overspeed situation on the turbine. Whereas when it's connected to the Classic and to Aux2, you can very, very finely control the wind turbine RPM and voltage coming in. It's a pretty interesting system. I'm not going to talk too much more about this because most folks here are probably interested in the solar end of things. But I have a wind turbine. I'm not sure why, but I'm a wind guy. Have been for 20 years, and I like beating my head against the wall. What can I say? So we have 1.5 kilowatt and 4 kilowatt models available, and they're available for both AC and DC output type turbines. This is probably the single most valuable tool I can show you for sizing. The classic string sizing tool is worth everything, and I'm surprised more people don't use it. I think they become a little bit intimidated when they see the inputs on the left-hand side, but for those of you who are used to sizing arrays, you'll recognize all this data. It's right there in the spec sheet for your array, and then you choose your nominal battery voltage, and you can play around with various configurations. You know, how many modules in series can I put on this charge controller? So if you see down the bottom here, you see 4 in series and 4 in parallel, so 4 strings of 4, and the classic 150 will always be in Hyper-VOC. You normally can't put 4 modules in series on a classic 150. Of course, it depends on the module, but most of the modern modules, that's the case. So very roughly, you know, you usually will see 3 in series on a 150, 4 on a 200, and maybe up to 5 on a 250. But again, depends on the module. Use the string sizer. It's very handy. It's a good tool for design. Available on our website. And Hyper-VOC, basically this is your safety net. So what you've got is a little buffer above that that Hyper-VOC setting. So 150, 200, and 250 for the 3 different classics. That is your input limit. But then you've got your battery voltage, nominal battery voltage above that. So you'll see the 162, the 174, the 198 there for the classic 150. And don't design purposely up into that range. Again, use the string sizer. It will let you know. We've got several people that seem to like to push the limit. You know, well, if you're giving me that Hyper-VOC, I know I can regularly take this up during the day to 160, 170 on my 48-volt battery system. Well, yeah, you won't hurt the controller, but the controller goes to sleep. You don't process any power above that input limit. And we do get the calls. Why is it resting? What's your input voltage? 165 on a 150. There you go. You know, drop a panel out of your series. And but for those cold mornings before the sun really starts to heat up the array, for those few times during the year where it might bump up a little bit, it will protect it, and it's a nice feature. And FollowMe. When you have multiple charge controllers in a system, they can conflict with each other. So in this case, if they are all classics, you can wire them together with locally available telephone cables and program them such to be in FollowMe mode, and they will share a single battery temperature sensor, and they will also share the equalize commands and so forth. And also you can put one in ground fault mode, and it with the jumper that's inside. Well, I don't think we talked about that at all, but you enable ground fault by placing a jumper on 2 pins inside the classic and turning it on in the programming menu, and it will also share that with the other classics. And so it's pretty good. The first one to change states, the first one to go to absorb or float or be put into EQ, will tell the other ones to follow. So it isn't actually like a master and slave configuration. It's actually the first one to change states will take the other ones with it. Do not expect that even if you have the equal amount of wattage on each controller, that each one is going to also process equal amounts of power. That is not what FollowMe does. What FollowMe does is just to coordinate charging states. You will often find one that will hang in there and finish the charging while the other ones back off, and it's very, very common to see just one doing the work and the other ones are idling. I like to use the analogy, it's like the old guys on the porch letting the young'uns finish the rest of it, but that's quite normal. The charging is not needed from the other controllers. The batteries are almost full, and FollowMe will coordinate that such that you only need the one to finish the job. So it works quite well. Third-party software that we mentioned previously, and this is using that open source Modbus protocol that we publish. This is a nice little one here that will monitor Outback systems and as well as the classic charge controllers themselves. Not programming, but basically just monitoring. So it's this has been pretty popular. It's available on our website, and several other things too are available. There's a really nice one for your Android. I'm not sure if it's available for iPhone, but I know it's available for Android, and it's a nice way to monitor your classic. Other things that you can do with the communications here, this is an old screenshot of Ryan's system. He's since added a ton of other stuff to this, but this was a nice little custom programming so he could see what was going on at his house if he was using grid power or he was putting an excess out into the grid, see the temperature outside and so forth, and you know, good for monitoring classics, Schneider, and Outback equipment. As I said, there's some very intelligent people on our forum doing some pretty cool things. So, tech support. All our contact information is found at midnitesolar.com, and if you call, you'll talk to a real person. Unfortunately, sometimes the call volume is absolutely ridiculous, so you may talk to voicemail, but you will very shortly be called back by a real person, and we do the best we can. There should be no multi-hour wait on hold listening to hold music. We try to avoid that at all costs. A lot of videos, webinars, and a variety of help documents under the documents section of the website. I encourage you to go visit it. If you haven't seen any of our videos, please do so. We're always adding new ones and updating old ones. A lot of really good information there. As well as the forum, visit the forum. A lot of FAQs there. A lot of you know, people will say, hey, I have a weird problem I've never seen before. You put it out there, and this is monitored by folks at Midnite, as well as, like I said, a lot of very intelligent people, and you're going to get some answers. So a very good resource. So let's move on to the kid. This is one of our newer, not the newest, but one of our newer ones here. It's been around for just a bit over 2 years. And the Marine version is there on the left, standard version on the right. I'll talk about this again here in just a little bit, but the Marine version comes with a somewhat different package of accessories. You'll see a nice little stand there, and it's got some little conduit pieces and a battery temperature sensor and so forth. The battery temperature sensor does not come standard with the one on the right, the standard kit, but it does come with the flush mount kit. And I'll go into that in a little bit more detail because we have a new one coming out here pretty soon, and anybody who's ever installed the kit in a flush mount system will probably be very happy to hear that. Here's the person you can thank for the kid. Or be angry at if your kid doesn't work, but this is Mario, and this is his baby. So we'll talk about the RV first. It has the boat mount kit and battery temperature sensor that I mentioned before. It also has some other connecting equipment, and available in black or white. But that little stand is handy. I actually have it here in my office for programming purposes, and sits up on its little stand and looks pretty cool. It's got a nice lighting controller. I use this and a Brat. We'll cover the Brat here shortly, but I use this and a Brat for night lights in my shop. My beer cooler's down the other end of the shop, and I no longer stub my toe because I have like dusk +4 on. I have a night light that turns on for about 4 hours after dusk, and I can wander my way down to the other end of the shop with no fear. You have data logging and programming available on the kit. It has a built-in display, and language options are going to be available soon. You'll just download the file and drag and drop to the kit for updating. So you can just pick whatever language you want, and off you go. And this generates a lot of calls here, so we'll talk for a minute here about the LEDs. The RFC light at the top I just love. I love the hours here can be rather long in my office, and during the winter especially, I'll come into the office, it's dark outside, and when I come out, it's dark again at night. I've never seen daylight, but what did my kid do? Well, I can see a green light on the top of it, and I know that even though my voltage is dropped down because the sun is gone and my batteries are at rest now, that I received a full charge today. It got into float today. Very, very handy. When you get to the next one down, it's been a week since full charge. Where I live, I get a lot of snow, and we don't see the sun sometimes for weeks at a time. I'll see that yellow light occasionally. And again, the 2 weeks without full charge. Thankfully, I don't see that one very often. When the float light is on in the middle, well, the battery it's in float charge. The OVR light, that's a bone of contention for a lot of people. They think that's over voltage only, and it is not. It's over anything, over voltage, over current, or over temperature. So if you're over voltage, that means your array is just, it's either configured wrong or you have an extremely cold day and you're just bumping up over into the Hyper-VOC mode. The over current is not a problem, simply because what it's saying is, look, I'm only a 30 amp charge controller, you've got enough of an array on me, and you're trying to process more than 30 amps through me, and I'm just not going to do it. It won't hurt the controller, but it will give you the OVR light to tell you that it's clipping, and it's not going to process any more than its 30 amps. Over temp, that could be cause for concern. There maybe not be enough ventilation around it, not enough airflow around, and if you're seeing that a lot, then probably you need to do something about that. The error light, well, that's different errors here and there. I believe Hyper-VOC is one of the ones that will turn on the orange light, and the CLP light down at the bottom, that's if you're using the clipper on it. That's a soon-to-be released product, or when the load is on. The load will also turn on that blue light.
Hey, Roy.
Yep.
I got a question for you. Any chance of a higher amp kit that could handle 2 of the latest 60 cell modules for a 12 volt system? I would say that right now the kid can actually do that. It could current limit on occasion, but for the most part, the 60 cell modules I'm seeing are like 250 to 275 watts. So unless you're in a really pristine place, it's still going to do just fine. It's not going to hurt the kid. But I would say that there is no plans for a higher amperage kid, but there are plans for other different charge controllers, right?
Right, and of course, you can also, we'll cover that, how you can expand the system here shortly. So you could have 60 amps worth of current using 2 parallel kids, but the kit itself, just a single kit, it would clip. It would clip under certain situations. It would be great for low light level operation, but during peak production times, you would lose that top end.
So the modules are 285 watt modules, so that would lend you with the possibility of 40 amps, in perfect conditions. Then if you was to think about that in regular conditions, you'd be down around 32. So I would say it's going to current limit some, but it's not going to hurt a thing other than current limiting some. So.
We have a lot of people doing that because if you go look around for a different type of module other than 60 cell, especially like a nominal 12 or 24 volt module, they're a lot more money than the 60 cell modules, and a lot of people are just saying, it still makes more sense. I'll lose some in the clipping, but I've gotten the modules pretty cheap, so we'll just go with it. So that's one way to look at it.
Okay, one more for you before you move on.
Yep.
I'm being asked, hopefully you'll shed some light on the difficulty of access to the inside of the kid after and during installation.
I will, absolutely. The first kit I installed, I blistered the walls here, but so I'm an installer as well, by the way. I'm not just sitting in the office, reading about this stuff. Most all of us in tech support install this, work with it every day, have it in our own home systems. We share your pain, absolutely, and we forward that on to Robin. We have shared our pain with Robin, and Robin has a solution. So we'll get to that here in just a couple minutes. So keypad buttons. Those of you familiar with our classic controller, it's somewhat similar to the classic programming keypad with a couple of differences. You don't hit the enter button to save anything on the kid. You hit the save button, and so that's takes a little bit of the confusion out of it. here's what I was talking about before about paralleling. You can share a single array within two kids. So if you wanted to put those 60 cell modules on there, you want to expand your array, you can add a second kid and turn it into a 60 amp controller.
Question for you.
Yep.
Does the kid talk to the classic?
Nope, not at all. No, it's a pretty independent kid. Think of it as a teenager. It just doesn't want to talk to its parent. But and to the best of my knowledge, there's no plans for it to do so.
Well, yes and no. So there's a couple avenues that are happening. So in conjunction with the inverter, we're working on things like a comm box that pull everything together. And with that, of course, the kid and the classic will talk to the comm box, so they would be able to coordinate through that. There's also a couple enthusiasts in New Zealand who are working on some things based on Raspberry Pi, type of stuff that are making it do some interesting stuff as well. So you'll see a couple interesting things in the future, I guess.
Okay, fair enough. So you can do the same thing with the kid in FollowMe mode that you do with the classic, where you can coordinate those. This is called sync mode. So it looks like we've tested that for up to 16 kids on a single battery. That sounds like one heck of a system, but in theory you could do 16 kids. And again, using a standard phone cable, RJ11 plug. So no special cable needed. So this gives you a rough idea of what it will process. These are the limits. You can over PV it. It doesn't hurt it. It'll be up to you to decide, do a little cost-benefit analysis if it's worth it or not. But as far as from a technical standpoint, it will handle it. So as you can see, because of the 30 amp output, the higher the battery voltage, the more power that it's going to process, 48 volt being the best in this particular scenario. String sizing, we have a string sizer for the kid, just like we do for the classic. This is a somewhat better graphic here, so you can see the inputs a little bit better. It's the output side on the right for the report is a little less involved than the classic because we only have one model of kid, whereas we have three different voltage classics, so they'll have three columns. But this one here is pretty easy to read, and so you can see here, max VOC is okay. You've told it what your coldest ambient temperature is and your hottest ambient temperature, and so it knows if you're going to stay within your voltage parameters based on ambient temperature, and you're good to go. So here it's a very small array. You're only using about 30% of the kid, but it will go up over 1, and you'll see 1.1, 1.2. That's fine. As many of you probably already know, you do not get full rated wattage out of an array. Typically it's probably about 80%, so that's why we say you're good up to about 1.2 or so, and after that you can go 120% over what you think the kid will handle, and it's probably just about maxed out at that point. So far we're doing any battery chemistry. We're not having any issues with charging all the different chemistries, 12 through 48 volt battery systems, and as I say on every one of these webinars, I just love that Trojan L16 REB in the corner. I wish my caps would light up like that. Well, for the right reasons anyway. And yep, flooded lead acid through gel, AGM, and lithium. All of them so far quite good. Nickel iron as well. And the reason for that is because we can go all the way up to 64 volt for the maximum flexibility. And the big key, I think, for a lot of the lithiums is they don't want an absorb, so you can adjust it all the way down to 0 minutes. So it'll go right into, go through the bulk phase and then right into float. And you don't have to be worried about overcharging that lithium.
Hey, Roy.
Yes.
Question comes up, what about Aux1 batteries? And I think the answer is they'll charge those just fine, and actually we're working with Aux1 to get their state of charge parameters, or algorithm, I should say, so that we can use the Whiz-Bang Junior to monitor those as well.
Okay, good enough. And I believe Rachel is using a kit on her Aux1s, or she has a classic on her?
She has both actually, and Carl has both over his place testing them as well.
Okay. Yep. So we are familiar with the Aux1s.
Yeah. So any questions, reach out to me, and I can put you in touch with Carl, one of our engineers who's done a lot of work with that.
And unlike the classics, which use the battery voltage plus your input voltage for the Hyper-V, you'll see the kit is always 12 volts no matter what battery you're on. So you only have a little 12-volt buffer above the 150-volt input limitation. So use the string sizer. Make sure you're not going to hurt anything in the kit. So this is going to answer that previous question. There are different ways to mount the kit. And the surface mount is what is going to be changing. So that's that small extension below the kit you see in the middle there for surface mount. It's going to have a bus bar, a little terminal block, I should say, down below in a much larger enclosure and be pre-wired into that, so that when you will access all the wiring through the front panel, and that's going to make it a lot easier to wire up. Yeah, it is a little bit tight in there for wiring. It will only accept a number 10 conductor. So, I mean, we have people trying to put some larger wires in there, and that does not work. But the surface mount should help a lot with the access issues.
And the wire size, yeah, because it'll take up the number.
And the wire size as well. Yeah, we're going to be bumping up the. What's the latest on the terminal block? What's that supposed to accept?
Number 6, I believe. 6 or 8.
6.
Yeah,
Excellent.
6,
Excellent. Yeah, that'll make it a whole lot nicer. I hate to ask this. Any estimates on ETA?
I believe everything's been ordered, so it just travel time from the manufacturer that molds the plastic. So.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Good. Yeah, I'm going to personally stay on top of that one because that was a big issue for me as well. So, kit has that USB port just like the Classic for firmware updates. If you've updated the Classic, you know that it can be kind of interesting, although 95% of the issues are on the Windows side, and once you get, I have a laptop that I configured to update Classics about 4 years ago, and I'm never going to get rid of that laptop because it's configured nicely, and I have no problems with the updates now. With the kit, it's a little bit different. When you go through the menu and you've got it connected up to the computer and you select update, a little window will open up basically like a file folder does on your computer, and you will just drag the firmware icon that is sitting on your desktop that you've already downloaded, pull it over, drag and drop, and you have updated the kit. It's very, very simple, and the firmware upgrades will always be available on our website at no charge. Whiz-Bang Junior, we went through this a little while ago. It's also available for use with the kit. The kit has a couple of aux ports now. One can be dedicated to the Whiz-Bang Junior, and you still have another one for diversion loads and generator start. We do have generator start in the kit, and by the way, it is not a dumb generator start. It actually will look for voltage rise in the battery bank and know that it has done the job, so that it will not continue to keep trying to start the generator over and over. And so you can use the Whiz-Bang Junior for end amps. You can actually program the Classic and the kit to go to float based on end amps, and and then there are other features are still in place. State of charge, the battery fuel gauge percentage, and the net positive and negative battery amp hours logged, and nice little feature.
Hey, Roy.
Yes.
Before you move on, I got a comment that I'd like to see the Classic with bigger lugs, at least for AWG. Thinking that might have been the kid, because the Classic does support up to number 4 THHN.
Right. It does.
The next one is, you mentioned an inverter coming. Please give us plenty of wiring space. Duly noted, and trust me when I say that we all realize that Robin is the best designer of small spaces in the world, and we will all do our very due diligence to make sure that he gives us The good news is you shouldn't be doing a lot in there. A lot of the stuff is already done for you, so it's going to be kind of interesting. Next question for you is, how does the AGS stop, assuming that's the AGS on the kid? I assume it stops on time and voltage, but maybe you can comment on that.
That one I'm not entirely sure on. I haven't really messed around too much with the AGS. And is Rachel in the background by any chance? Or maybe Rachel knows. Well, anyway, yeah, I'm not really entirely sure on that. I don't think it's time.
Well, I'm thinking it's got a max runtime, but I also think it probably...
There is a max runtime. Yes, you're right. You're right.
Probably has the ability to shut off at float or things like that. Or
if you want to send me an email, excuse me, if you want to send me an email after this, whoever asked that question, to roy@midnitesolar.com, I'll get that answer for you. I should know that anyway, so you know, shame on me. But we support a lot of products, and we you know, stump the chump. You got me. Any other questions, or was that it?
That's it for the moment. I will
okay.
keep you posted.
All right, sounds good. And then last but not least, we're just about at the end of our time here. We've only got a couple more slides, so hang in there with us. The Brat, our newest edition here, been out a little over a year and doing quite well. Very, very basic little unit. It's a PWM type controller. This is not an MPPT. So if you're going to throw a 60-cell module on it on a 12-volt battery, you're going to drag it down to close to battery voltage and probably lose you know, quite a bit of your upper end on the module. But on a 24-volt system, it's actually not a bad match. This will do 12 and 24 volt, flooded, gel, and AGM supported, set with dip switches. And same thing with the lighting controller, very nice lighting controller, by the way, and there is a rotary, 8-position rotary switch for that. Everything's user adjustable for all your voltages, equalize included. No relays, no fans, no external heatsink, and it's waterproof. The joke internally here at least is nail it to a tree and you're good to go. And it's temperature compensated. Now, not temp comp in the battery bank itself, but temp comp in the vicinity of the controller. There is a little thermistor in there that senses, you know, ambient temperature around the controller, so it's close. And you know we like our LEDs, so we've got 4 LEDs for the bulk, float, load on, and low battery. And there are several different light sequences for different fault conditions that are outlined in the manual. Very customizable, as I mentioned, for the lighting controller. I've been using the Dust Plus 4 on this as well for my shop. Works good. And it's rain and bug proof, and it's built in the USA. So just remember, this is it's a low-cost controller. It's actually meant to replace one of our several of I think 9 of our competitors' charge controllers all in one, and comes with the little Heiko glands for putting your number 10 conductors up into there. And it's I think street price is under $100 on this. Works very well, so something you might want to check out. And if you come to the shows once in a great while, we've been known to hand one out at the show if you want to experiment with it. But get there early, they go quick. So that's it for this presentation. Here's our information here, and again, tech support is available for design information if you're specifying equipment, as well as if you have any issues. Any other questions there, Ryan, pop up? Or?
I don't have any yet, but feel free to jot your questions down, or if you want me to unmute you so you can ask it personally, I can just have you raise your hand or something. I can do that.
Give that a couple of seconds, and
no, we'll give them a few minutes to type in questions.
Okay. For those of you who are thinking of leaving, thank you very much for stopping by. Appreciate your attendance. Like I said, any further questions, our contact information is on the website. Feel free to get a hold of us by phone or email, and we're always happy to talk to you.
All right.
Anybody has any questions?
Yeah, anybody that's in the Salt Lake City, Utah area can come visit Roy and I at PrepperCon this weekend. So Roy will buy the first beer. So.
Yeah, limited to the first 100 or so, or Mary will be all over my case. Right?
Okay, we got a statement. The Classic is awesome, thanks. can you discuss wire sizing relative to terminal temperature? Is the next question.
Yeah, what is the terminal temp in the Classic?
Yes. I honestly don't know. I probably used to know, but I've been out of tech support so long, it's not at the top of my memory anymore.
And again, send an email to roy@midnitesolar.com and I will find that answer. Stump the chump twice. Wow.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that I would say that kind of gets a lot of electricians off guard is that the Classic handles number 4 THHN, and we recommend a 100 amp breaker, and that tends to throw the electricians in the room for a little bit of a ride. But you know, you have to remember that number 4 is good for like 130 amps in free space, and because you're using something like a breaker box or a Midnite E-panel or a GSLC from Outback or something, there is not a long conduit run, so that is all considered free space, and the number 4 is, you know, is perfectly acceptable in that application. Next one, I have a customer who picked up a reconditioned forklift battery and had no data on amp hours. Can the Classic figure out the amp hours?
No, not really. It's going to be a matter of observing it and experimenting and probably working it out. I mean, you could just pick a number, and then you know, if it's being very optimistic on state of charge versus battery voltage, then of course you've overestimated, and if it's being pessimistic, you've underestimated. So you could narrow in on it eventually, but it's going to require input from a human being.
Yeah, the other thing I might suggest on that is a few pictures, and jump on our forum, register on our forum and post the pictures, and chances are somebody else has seen that same battery and can give you some input on it.
Yeah, that's a good idea as well.
Okay, I'm being told that 110.14 IC, I'm thinking that's a 14.C, does not allow free air rating. I will have to look into that. Maybe they can clarify that because it says 14 IC right now.
All right, that's in your camp. You can do
Yep.
that one.
No, I will research that. So.
Okay. All right. That do it for us?
At the moment, I'm not seeing anything else pop up.
All right. Well, we're pretty much at time here, so like I said, any other questions, you can direct them to to me, Roy, or Ryan, and we will get you some answers.
Sounds good.
All right. Well, thanks everybody. We're going to end this one. You know, if you're gluttons for punishment, we have another one in just under an hour. If you care to join us, it'll be a repeat. So if you missed anything on this one and came in late, you can maybe hit the first part of it coming back in another hour. So thanks again for attending. Everybody have a good day.